I want to share from a few moments from the verses that have been read to us that will help us a little bit understand the importance, what I think, not only what I think, but as we think about the mission of the Salvation Army, what does it mean for us and how we engage and all the things that we do, where we do it, all that sort of stuff. It starts with this one thing. And like I said before, it's Jesus. He's all we need. And I don't know if you feel like me, but I have an ability to get lost like no other. No one's got a better shortcut than me. Right? Now, if you're one of these people, and some of you are nodding along because you know, or you're looking at the one next to you because you also know that they're worse. But I have this inbuilt desire to think that there's a shortcut to do a lot of things, right? Particularly when I'm driving or if I'm on I don't know, where I think I'll go this way, we can take a shortcut. The truth is, if you go for a walk in the forest, or not that I do that either, but if you go for a walk, or you go in the city, or you're walking in places, one of the things that you need to do, if you get lost, is you don't just keep going forwards. If you get lost, you go backwards. And you look for landmarks, and you look for things that look familiar to you. And I think it's the same for me, and I think it's the same in not only my own life and my own ministry, but I think it's the same in the life of our core. I'm not saying that we're lost, but we look for these landmarks, these pillars, these strong things that drive us and help us. Now, pillar number one is Jesus. Oh, now I need to talk about these slides too, by the way. I won't go and do this every week. This is just the introduction. I don't do slides. Yvette asked me for my notes. I was like, Yvette, you're not going to get anything out of these notes. She's got to do the slides. So when Dean's preaching, you'll have that's all good. Me, you'll get a title slide. And so if that's your style, we can pray about that later on. If you get lost, you walk back to these markers and you find these places where you go, oh, this looks familiar. Ah, yes. And you go to certain places. Now, for me, I have in my life some places that remind me very strongly of what God has done in my life. Very strongly. I mentioned before that I grew up at the Preston Core. Not a moment would go past or any place that I've spoken around the country, not a moment would go past where I wouldn't thank God for my experiences at that core. But you know, it wasn't the building. Shock horror. There are some beautiful kebab places around the corner. Actually, maybe it was that. It was the people. It was the people. And so, when we think about the verses we're going to look at in a minute, if we start thinking about shepherding people, and Jesus is our guide as our shepherd, we actually all play a significant role in shepherding the people around us. Not just the young ones. Got to keep an eye on the young ones. I'll do that. Or we look at our families and we shepherd them. We look at our community. We look at the groups that we're involved in and we shepherd and we care for and we nurture them. So when Jesus says, and he's talking to the disciples and he says this, he calls down from Zechariah, he says, I will strike the shepherd. It says this. He says to the disciples, this very night you will fall away from me. He then goes on to quote Zechariah, he says, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will scatter. So who do they go after? They go after the shepherd. Now, if you're, this is not like a shepherd, like I'm the big shepherd and you're all the flock, although we all are shepherds. Let's make that very, very clear. We all have a role to play in shepherding people. He says to Peter, you're going to fall and you're going to deny me and you're going to stumble and you're going to... And of course Peter, and who can't associate with Peter? Oh, no. Not I, not one chance. Nothing could disturb us. Nothing could separate us. Nothing could make that a big change for us. But actually we know that when it scatters and things happen, we do go and find another thing. Because we actually come to a point where we say, actually it's not Jesus that we need now. We're going to find something else that we need because we're not going to put our trust in him. So we fall away or we give up or we stumble. And we stop following. We stop following the shepherd. We've seen people leave. We see people who become dismayed. We see people who become curious about other things. We see people who commence a discipleship journey, who decide that there is this new life that they want to follow, this new experience of following Jesus, and then something happens, another shepherd comes along and whisks them away or tells them something different. And we've talked about this last week, we see it in our families, we see it in our places of work, we see it all around us, where there once was much rejoicing. And then there's sorrow, and there's deep sadness. I'm not talking about church attendance. I'm talking about following Jesus. The idea of going back and looking for lost things is very scriptural. But actually there's this idea too that it's not about going back to look for lost people only. It's also looking for the sheep that have gone, but also looking for new sheep, looking for new people, looking for new experiences in new places, in doing ways to experience the fullness of Jesus in our own lives, in our communities and the lives around us that can be changed and transformed. You know, I think there's kind of two ways I think about this. I think about living a life of faithfulness or just hopefully hanging on for dear life. And there's a life of gratitude. And we talk more and more and more about the life of faithfulness. We've got to be faithful. We've got to press into it. We even say some nice Jesus words like that. We press into these things and we make sure we hang on and we cling to the old rugged cross, right? That's what we do. We're faithful. But there's this other part of us that we need to celebrate more and more is that of being grateful, where God has answered our prayers, where God has shown and proven to us that He is faithful. Now, we stay close to the shepherd, and we linger and we hold on to the hope that we find in Him. And then we get to celebrate that which God has done. We celebrate what God is doing in our lives. I was just looking over at the band. Rob Wiseman, this is the third time I've been his corps officer. May the Lord grant me the strength, the peace. Actually, as I look around the band, Ron, over here, used to be my hairdresser. Now, put this in a Google review, I don't recommend him. 10 years, I say, 10 years. Anyway, here's what I'm saying. We need to be faithful people. We need to live with faith and hope. And we're going to celebrate more. We're going to tell the stories of what God has done. Confident enough to talk about our struggles. Confident enough to know that we don't know all the answers. But brave enough and courageous enough to step into a place where we allow God to lead us and guide us. And we all play a role in that because we are all part of the shepherding community. The Bible talks about people being scattered. This idea that when Jesus says, you know, I'll be scattered and everything will go away and you'll all run away. And over the last few years, and I think about dispersed people, I've thought about this a lot because in the last few years working at THQ, working with a group of people looking at how we can make mission in our local faith communities more effective. So obviously we talk about generational stuff. We talk about young people, young adults. We talk about mature oldies, seniors. We talk about these weird people in the middle who have all their kids have moved out but they haven't quite got grandkids and all that sort of stuff. Then we talk about young adults. We talk about all of the breadth of experiences that we have, and we spend a lot of time thinking about what does that mean. One of the things that I think about, if you're going to scatter people, it's not just in terms of the physical stuff, it's the other needs. And this is where my life has changed. I have become more aware of the diverse needs of people. Whether it's people experiencing any form of disability, any neurodivergent experiences, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, our Indigenous communities, these are all part of our flock. Now on Tuesday, I'd done a solid, probably hour's work. Well, when I say solid, the time I got. So I went for a walk down to that street where all the cafes are, where the trams are, and I sat there and I was just watching. I'm a people watcher. Right? There's another name for it, but let's go with people watching, right? And I was watching, and I was like, who lives here? That was the question in my head. Who lives here? And I saw everything. I saw everything. So we have a dispersed community around us. Perhaps people not living with a great sense of hope. And we have the skills and we have the abilities in this room to take the message of Jesus out there. I wasn't that keen on sitting through church when I was a kid. That's why I play the drums. You got to hit something, all right? But I also know there's a lot of young people who don't like sitting through church. And back in the day, you just had to suck it up, or you got taken out the back room and told, you know. Or what it does for us now, we realise that our whole community is very, very different. And for us to engage with our community more effectively, we need to do things. We need to learn new things. We need to bring the skills that we have outside of our church world in and allow God to use us. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. Fair enough. So when he sees a wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and it scatters. We're shepherds. We're not the flock. We're shepherds. And I'm asking all of us to become the very best shepherds that we can be. One of the interesting things about this story is that Peter's denial is... Peter gets a hard time. He deserves it too, by the way. He does get a hard time. But it's actually not the end of the story. Because Jesus says, I'll come back. And he sort of said, I'll meet you in Galilee. That's where I'll be. And why this is significant is that, he says, but after I have risen. So here's the point. After I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee. And it's significant because it's not the place you would think that he would go. It's not where all the power lies, where all the governance and all the politics and all the wealth. That's not where it's at. Jesus said, I'm coming back. I'm not going where you think I'm going. But actually, I need you to meet me there. Meet me there. And so instead of going to the centre of the place of Jerusalem or going to the centre of a place where the expectation would be, it sort of goes off, what are you going down there for? It'd be like you saying, what are you going to Preston for? Or Preston people saying, oh, don't bother going to Camberwell, right? He's not going where you think he's going. But the question is, will you go where he's going? Will you meet him there? So Galilee becomes this foundational place for us. Now, we don't have a Galilee in this postcode, but we do know that Jesus will pour out his Spirit and his power amongst us. Because he will go ahead of us and we will faithfully follow. And there'll be moments where we faithfully follow where we think, I'm not really sure what's going on here. I don't know if this is a good idea. We need a new officer. Right? There's not many left, so be careful. Right? Oh dear. I'm going to get an email on Monday morning, I can tell you that now. Anyway. Oh, I've lost what I was going to say. Oh no, so if we have, we will trust and we will follow and we will step out. You know, and I've used this illustration a number of times recently, and I'm going to use it one more time, because this idea that when we gather people to do something that maybe scares us, you know, if we're called to do things that just are a slam dunk every time, of course we're going to do it. Easy, done. What if God says to us, actually, you are doing this, but I need you to go and do this? Can you do it? Do you want to do it? Will you allow God to shepherd you, Jesus to shepherd you into that? You think about Jesus on the, let's go back to Peter, Simon Peter on the boat. Jesus, if that's you, call me. And Jesus says, what? Come. So firstly, be very careful what you pray for. Very careful. But more importantly, the notion of water in Scripture is actually that of destruction. You think about the floods, you think about all the destruction with all that, you think about, that's why we build houses now, and well, not people build houses and hotels right near the water because it's picturesque and it's beautiful, right? If you go back thousands of years, they didn't build near the water because they were scared of it. So, join these two things together with me. If Jesus calls to the disciples on the boat and says, if it's you, tell me to come to you, he actually calls them out onto the very thing that scares them the most. And they do it. Peter does it. So let's not be afraid to be called to the thing that scares us the most. Let's not be afraid to change. Let's not be afraid to be bold. Let's not be afraid to be courageous. Because he says in that same interaction, take courage, it is I. Come. One of the things that I do believe wholeheartedly is that in a world where we look for certainty, not a lot of it exists. And even in our own spirituality, our own discipleship, you know, there's some things that I've held on tightly and some things I don't hold as tightly anymore, whatever. You know, there's lots of changes for us. Let's be curious. Let's be brave enough to ask questions that maybe we go full circle and end up back where we started. But let's be curious. Curiosity over certainty wins the day. I also think when I think about this in the terms of our faith community and the ministries of the core, the broader work that we do, I'm more convinced than ever that the Salvation Army exists and always has existed for the whosoever. Whosoever. My mum's here and I don't want to embarrass her, but I will. What's she going to do? Take me out the back and smack me again? No. They were different days, people. They were different days. When I was a kid, my parents decided that they would foster babies. And I think 99, was it 99? 99, imagine having, over the years, 99 newborn babies in the house. That's like Alan Dixon territory, that is. And I remember some would come for a weekend, some would stay for a little while, some would stay for years, and then they would go. Some had horrible stories. Horrible stories. But what it embedded in me was that there's always room. There's always room for more. And if you think about setting a table at home and You know, if you need to grab another chair, you can always squeeze another person in, can't you? That's what I like about faith communities. There's always room. And maybe some of us have to shuffle down a little bit. Maybe we have to talk to different people. I don't know. But whosoever will may come. And if you think about that and you think about the way in which we will interact with each other, the way we see our world, the way we see the things around us, all we need to do is to have a vision of what God sees. What does God see? Well, He sees need. And I guess what I'm asking you is that will you go out to the places, to the Galilees, out to the margins where Jesus will be? And will you prepare a table for a guest? Even in the Psalms it says, I prepare a table, in the presence of my enemies. Well, that's who we are. We want people to come. We also need to go, but we want people to come. And when they do, it's not about, we do this and we also do this and we also do this. We go back to the very beginning and it says, Jesus is all I need. And we have this opportunity to introduce people to Jesus. I think that for me is in totality who we are. Gone too long? No? It's a bit waffly this morning. It'll get more waffly as it goes on, I promise. But these are all the things I wanted to say day one. Which is one other thing. Claire and I were appointed to a call once, and after we had a morning tea, and this lady came charging in, you know the type, first Sunday. And she said, the kids are playing on the drums. I was like, oh, good. And she says, don't tell me, like the finger was out, she said, don't tell me you're one of those corps officers that let the kids play on the drums after the meeting. And I was like, you bet I am. You bet I am. If it's too noisy in here, go out there. If it's too noisy out there, prepare a table. How does a young person engage in our church? Whatever it is, it's not just about doing stuff, because we can get really busy and we can whip it up into a frenzy really, really quickly. But meaningful, purposeful stuff. Because He is all we need. It starts there. We're going to sing this chorus again. And just as we sing, I'm going to invite you just to pray. Pray for the scattered, the dispersed, the people that we haven't spoken of today. And maybe prepare a table, a chair at your table. Because the story isn't about Peter's denial. It's about where Jesus will meet us. And He'll meet our need. Because He is all that we need.